this final lesson, we are going to look at bringing your animation and artwork to the next level by bringing it from Procreate into Adobe After Effects. I use Adobe After Effects for a lot of different reasons to kind of plus the artwork, whether that's from refining your animation and adding cool effects and stylization that you can't get just inside of Procreate itself, to putting together a lot of little elements I've built in Procreate into one bigger project seamlessly. Now, for this lesson, I'm going to assume that you have no familiarity whatsoever with After Effects, because if it's your first time in the program, it can be a little overwhelming at first glance, but with just a surface level grounding in all of the fundamentals of After Effects, you can really get a lot out of bringing it to your animation workflow as a Procreate artist. And if you're already a motion designer or already somebody who has worked in After Effects before, that's awesome, because I use these techniques all the time, not only in my personal artwork, but in my professional work as an animator and a motion designer. And you might be surprised how indispensable Procreate can become in a professional workflow. So I'm super excited to share these tips and tricks with you and hopefully get you inspired by the possibilities to get into After Effects and see what you can add to your work. So what are some reasons we might want to bring our files from Procreate into After Effects? Well, if you need to iterate or create multiple versions of the same general piece, that can sometimes be a lot easier in After Effects. For example, if you've made an animated logo for a project, and then you need to output that at a bunch of different sizes or in a bunch of different colors or on a variety of different backgrounds, having that in After Effects can be really helpful. And if you need to hand off that asset to a team that you're working with, maybe you're working with editors that need to be able to place that animation somewhere in a Premiere timeline, in the corner, overlaying some footage, having it in After Effects is a great way to have that easy to hand off. And once you're in After Effects, things like resizing and recoloring especially, and even just moving around your different animated elements is really easy. Another reason is you might want to add effects or different texturing or just different stylization that you can't do in Procreate alone. After Effects is a visual effects and motion design and compositing software. So it does a lot of different stuff. It has a lot of cool features and effects built in that you just can't get directly inside of Procreate. So the learning curve for After Effects can be quite steep and it can be intimidating because it has so many functions and it can be so many different types of things. But I will show you some techniques that I use every day in the work that I'm doing that's super easy to get started with, just to get the lay of the land and hopefully get you up and running. You can also easily loop animations inside of Procreate, as we've seen time and again in this course. But depending on the outcome that you're intending for the piece, it can sometimes be more efficient to bring animation into After Effects and finalize the loops in there. It's just a great way to take the base level stuff you can build in Procreate, and then just like add a little bit more on top of it, add some more complexity, layer different things together. So with all that said, let's take a look at a project that I made almost entirely inside of Procreate and finalized, put everything together inside of. So this is a piece of fan animation I did over the winter holidays this year, December and early January. It's a tribute to my favorite podcast of all time, Rude Tales of Magic, which is an actual play D&D podcast that does contain some mature themes and adult stuff. So if you're a kid, ask your parent to check it out for you before you listen to it. But I really love this podcast, and there's this sequence I'm just playing it back without audio now, but you can see this on my website if you'd like to check it out. The audio in this sequence is one of the players, Tim Platt, is improvising this dream sequence that his character Stir Fry is having. And it's just really fun and colorful and cute. And I just found it so vivid and charming. I really wanted to animate it in this style. I, gravitate towards that classic Mary Blair vintage Disney sort of style. And I just thought it felt so perfect for that. So this is definitely the biggest cell animated project that I've ever done on my own. And working on this, it took me about 3 weeks from start to finish to do this whole project. And it was an amazing crash course for me to get more familiar with Procreate. And it really cemented how much I love Procreate and opened my eyes for how powerful of a tool it can be when you want to make stuff like this. So let's look at the stack I have in Procreate where all of the files from Procreate that went into this project live. Okay, so this is the stack where all of my elements that went into the Stir Fry's Dream animation live in Procreate. So Procreate's stack system is helpful for keeping you somewhat organized, but things can definitely get messy fast. You can see how much stuff I have in this stack. So the way that I try to help myself keep a little bit more organized is by keeping these stacks organized chronologically. So at the top and to the left are kind of like the latest elements, the most recent versions of whatever I'm working on. And then as you scroll down to the bottom, it gets older. And you go all the way down to the bottom of this particular stack, you can see I have animations in here that were just like early tests from when I was just playing around with the idea of making this. And I just wanted to know, can I even animate something that would look right to me? Just playing around with some basic ideas before I actually was like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling this style. I think I can make this work. Like, let's do this. So those are just some animation tests. And then as you scroll up, we get into some more sketching and storyboarding up into the actual animation and artwork. So another thing about being organized with these bigger projects is that I like to name and date my canvases. You'll see a lot of them in here don't have that on our just untitled artwork, which is the default canvas name that Procreate gives you when you create a new canvas. But once I have settled on something that I like or that I'm fairly confident I'm going to use later, I will give it a title. So this is what I landed on as the layout sketch for this castle sequence, where I'm going to zoom the camera down through this sort of section at the top of this castle to pan into the moat that's on the other side. And I wanted this cool perspective look. But I was really struggling with that because, drawing in perspective can be kind of hard, even with the perspective tools. So you can see I have a bunch of different iterations trying to nail that look. And, using the perspective tools, trying to be like, okay, if I do this in like a pan, I'll have to move the castle down and, figure out how this is going to work. So once I was happy with this general layout, I named it Stir Fry's Dream Castle Rough 1220. And that would be December 20th would have been the date that I made this. And it's on the leftmost side. So I know, if I have to take a break from working on this project and I come back later, I can see that one and be like, yeah, that's the one that I settled on. So I can just jump right back in where I was. So when I am animating in Procreate for work projects, or generally for larger projects, I like to draw in 4K or double 16:9. So instead of a 1920 by 1080 canvas, this double 16:9, so 3840 by 2160 pixel canvas, that's a template that I made because I like to have the flexibility. If I work at double size, once I get that into After Effects, where my output is always going to be 1920 by 1080 up to this point in my career, I have a lot more room to play with, like scaling that animation up or down, just depending, so I'm not losing resolution. But as we've learned in this course, if you're working in a larger canvas, that can severely limit the amount of layers you have to play with. And in animation, that means fewer frames to draw before you hit the limit and you can't make any new frames, any new layers anymore. So that can be a pain. And for this project, I worked in 1920 by 1080 because I was trying to mitigate that, and I still ran into running out of layers or frames in my canvases. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't still make really big animations in Procreate. It's just that you'll have to break it up into multiple files. So if you look at my crocodile animation, when he's jumping up out of the water and snapping up this like flag, this piece of paper flag, and then he sort of like smiles and shows his teeth, I ended up splitting those into two different Procreate files. So let's play this. I have this guy here, and then he holds on this end frame where he's just like looking at the camera. And in After Effects, I have him sort of sit on this frame for a while before he transitions into this animation where he smiles and then he opens up his mouth. Now, as long as you are being careful and being aware of where you're splitting up these files, and don't move anything around inside, you can seamlessly stitch these two files back together in After Effects and there'll be no problem. You just have to kind of jump in and out. And I had so many color layers when I was coloring in the teeth and everything. If you can look at each frame, has a ton of different individual layers because I was splitting everything up. Probably more than I really needed to, honestly, but just to give me as much flexibility as I wanted. It just filled it right up. So just something to be aware of. You can always plan around that. So every piece of artwork that you see in that animation, I built in Procreate, and even combined things that you might not think to, like there's this flag animation where it's curling around and floating down to the moat. I'll just show it here if I can. So this part I thought was going to be kind of hard because it has a face on it and I want to keep that perspective right. I wanted this to look nice, but I knew this would be challenging to just do on my own. So I ended up animating that in 3D, in Cinema 4D, and bringing that into Procreate as an image sequence and tracing over it on top of it. So if we come out here, you can see I got 3D flags. That's the render where I stuck the texture on there, the drawing of his face, so I could always just like trace over that. And then I just traced over every frame. And that's how I ended up making a much smoother flag animation than I would be able to do necessarily just by eyeballing it the whole way. Now, before I show you how I get my animation canvases from Procreate into After Effects, I want to show you something that is super helpful that I do exclusively in Procreate, which is storyboard creation that I use to make animatics for my bigger projects. So if you're not familiar, a storyboard is a sequence of drawings that help you figure out the layout and the composition of a whole animated piece. And when you turn it into an animatic by stringing it out on a timeline and adding some minor animation to different pieces here and there, it helps you figure out all the timing and the beats of your whole project, of everything that's going to happen in your animation. It just gives you the basic guideline for the rest of your project. So I storyboard frequently for client projects, and I always start in Procreate using the animation timeline. So if I come down here and open up Stir Fry's Dream Storyboards, you can see how I do this. This is just a 1920 by 1080 canvas, and I treat every frame as another storyboard. And what I'll do is open up settings and make the frames per second either 1 or 2 frames per second, something really slow, so that I can draw and then I can just go back to the start and hit play and watch it at a slow enough speed that I'm able to sort of follow along with what I've done so far and feel like, does this look good? Does this look right? You know, is this timing working? Now, as I've mentioned before, you cannot, as of yet, import audio into Procreate, which would be so amazing if they did that, Procreate, please. But you can't. And again, that doesn't, have to hold you back whatsoever. There's plenty of ways to get around that for now. And so what I do in this instance is I don't need to have the timing figured out right away. This is something I can listen to the audio if I have the script recorded as I'm playing it back. I can read through the script and plan out these drawings, and then I can finalize the timing when I take these different boards and these drawings into After Effects. And then I can add little animation if I want to. So let me show you. I made a few different versions of an animatic for this before I went ahead and I just dove in and started animating it. And you can see I just have placeholders for some of this stuff. And then I have animated actual pans and zooms and stuff in After Effects. And you can see here, and I was trying to finesse the timing of what that might look like. I just used a shape layer in After Effects, just a static little flat image as a placeholder for that flag. And this is super rough. Because you don't need more than that necessarily. You're just trying to give yourself some guideposts for the work that you want to make. Or you're trying to figure out, does this actually work? You know, does this look good? Is the timing right? So you could see at that moment when the crocodile had all his teeth come out, like you don't need to draw all of that individually happening in a storyboard like this, or here, you know, we just kind of hang here for a long time. But in the final animation, I'll have the stars twinkling and I'll have the face drawing on in the sky and all of this stuff. But this is more than enough to give me the overall guideline for where is this going to go, what needs to be animated for this part, and that kind of thing. So the way I get any work from Procreate into After Effects, from storyboards to colored and inked animation, is by exporting it from Procreate as a PSD, as a Photoshop file, and saving it to my personal Dropbox. So let's do that with one quick example. Here is an animation, and I think it'd be great for us to play around with. And this is something that you see, it's right at the intro of the Stir Fry's Dream piece, where the narration says like big, emphasis on big castle. And I thought it'd be fun to intro between the title card and the actual animation with something like this. And I couldn't decide what color I wanted this to be. And if you do run into something where you have, you know, black outline with a plain fill, but you don't know exactly what color you want the final piece to be, it's safe to do it in white, because using the tint effect in After Effects, and I'll show you this when we get in there, you can easily change that color as many times as you want and see how it looks. So if I look at the layers, this is what we've got. Nothing is in a group right now. Got everything sequenced out. I'm playing this back at 12 frames a second. So let's take this into After Effects by going up to the wrench icon, getting our actions menu, hitting share, and then you'll go to PSD, exporting. Now I'll scroll down here and you can see that it has a save to Dropbox option here. And I certainly think it's worth trying to see if this will work for you, but sometimes I have found that I do run into issues going directly to save to Dropbox from Procreate with PSD files. And it's not quite clear what the best, if there's a fix for that at this time. So just to be safe, I will go to save to files, and this will let you, save to files will let you save it anywhere on your iPad directly. And I've made a folder in here that I'm saving these demo files in. So if you don't have a folder where you want to put stuff and keep it organized, you can make a new folder by clicking this little folder up in the top right with the plus sign on the corner. But I have this demo folder, which I've selected, so I'll hit save. Very cool. And then I will jump out of Procreate and open up the Files app. So if you don't know where that is on your iPad, you can bring down the search menu by dragging here, typing in Files, it should pull it up. Open that up, and here's my demo folder, but I had it saved on my iPad, Procreate Demo. And there it is. So from here, I'll hit select up here in the top right, click that project, and go down to share, which comes up here at the bottom left. And from here, I will go to that save to Dropbox option. And so far, this has been a foolproof way for me to get this onto my iPad. I will save it just directly into my Dropbox folder. And once that's uploaded, I should be able to jump onto my desktop and we will be off to the races. Okay, so we are on our iPads. So now we just need to navigate to wherever we saved that file to make sure that it all came through. So I'm going to open up my files, and I am actually already in the right place, but I'll just trace my steps again. So iCloud Drive, that's where I saved it. And I saved it in my CC Procreate PSDs folder. And here it is, 5A flag waving demo. So I want to download that to my iPad if it's not already. Here it is. And I can import it into Procreate by selecting it and sharing it to Procreate. Procreate should be here in one of your options. So I'll click that and we will get this confirmation that it is sending to Procreate. Now to see it, we need to go to Procreate. So I'll jump out of that, come in here, and it's importing. And just like that, we've got it. So I'll come in here. This had a transparent background when I saved it out of Photoshop, but I do have that background layer I can turn on in Procreate. You can see that it's all here, every little layer. And what's really cool is that you can come up here and turn on the animation timeline and see right away that it's coming in correctly. I can change the frame rate to whatever I want. I can play around with the onion skinning. And so my process for this is much the same as any iteration. To trace on top of it, I'll make a folder for every layer. Let's turn down our onion skin so we're not getting distracted. And I'll turn down the opacity of my basic frame. And I will trace over the top of all of my frames in whatever finished style I want. Super rough, obviously, not accurate to how meticulous I was being on the actual project, but just to give you an idea. And then, you know, go back in, add more layers if I want to color. Whew, super sloppy, but you get the idea. And I will repeat that same step for every single frame, and using the same techniques that you learn in this course, import this back into After Effects and go from there.